First of all, I want to thank you all for coming today. This is a pretty important day, I think, for moving the climate agenda forward. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our hosts for reserving this beautiful spot, Nelson Mullins, Riley, and Scarborough, which I think is right across the hall, their offices. And we're thrilled to be sharing with you today the latest product from our Climate Innovation 2050 initiative that we've been doing at C2ES. And we have a terrific lineup to talk about climate policy this morning. You know, these are pretty challenging times on the climate front, but there's also some amazingly encouraging times. We're beginning to see more and more impacts every day in the news and across the world. Science continues to get better and better at what we know the challenges are, what the effects are, how they're starting to be unfolding around the world. We also have differences between Congress and the executive branch and states and cities. But what we see, even while we have all these differences, we see growing action taken both at the state and local level. We see growing action in particular with companies in the United States and around the world. And what we see, and it's represented here at right here in these two chairs, growing bipartisan interest in Congress that there is something that needs to be done about climate change. And what we see is this growing momentum. And our mission at C2ES, working with our partners, is to see how we can make that momentum go faster and how we can strengthen it. You know, we launched this initiative a year ago, and we brought companies together across different sectors to address the challenge of how do we decarbonize the United States economy. And the companies have all engaged with us really in very helpful and partnership ways and help us to identify what the potential solutions are. And what we like to say, there's a lot of ground truthing involved with what we did because companies are the ones that are going to have to implement many of the policies. And we're pleased today to release the results of our work, Getting to Zero, a U.S. Climate Agenda. And you're going to hear more of the details of that shortly. But in a nutshell, the agenda outlines the policies we need over the coming decade to get us on track, to get us on a path that will achieve carbon neutrality no later than 2050. No small chore, but this can get us on the path. Our aim is to inform the discussion. We're not offering this as a definitive blueprint, but it's our best approximation based on our own analysis and our deep engagement with the companies on the policies we need to put in place as quickly as we can. And the best way to do that is with strong bipartisan support, which is why we're especially pleased to begin our program this morning with Congressman Ted Deutch and Congressman Fred Upton. One thing in addition to both being interested in climate change, both of them are graduates from the University of Michigan. I just want to say that. Congressman Deutch is from the 22nd District in Florida, which is southern Florida, a little bit north of Miami, an area that's impacted by climate change. I'm not going to tell you all the different committees he's on because they're really tight for time. I have a long thing of all their accomplishments. These are very accomplished members of Congress. Congressman Fred Upton is the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Energy, but he's from Southwest Michigan, and his district is on Lake Michigan, another important natural resource for America, and this is what brings, I think, his interest to natural resources and environmental issues. Not to mention he was chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee in the last Congress. But both of these members are members of the Climate Solutions Caucus, and Congressman Deutch is the co-chair of it. So given the schedules here, I'm going to ask Congressman Upton to say a few words, and then he can leave, and then Congressman Deutch, you can come up.
Thanks, Bob. And I appreciate my staff gave me the Getting to Zero publication last night, but I didn't have a chance to go through it as I was involved in a lot of things, and that's at some point you have to say, "Hello, wife, how are you?" I'm delighted to be here, and I regret I really do regret that my appearance is going to be more of a cameo, as when I agreed to do this, we were unaware of a major markup in the Health Subcommittee. Sort of an important issue, tobacco, so we'll see how this goes a little bit this morning. But let me just say, climate change is real. It's that debate is really over. And I would call to you a report that John Shimkus and Greg Walden and I did earlier this year about what we can do on better energy efficiencies. I know that I look at my state of Michigan, our utilities are going to be phasing out all of their coal plants within the next couple of years. We've had a number of them close already. We had an early mandate after 2000 to get to 15% renewable by 2015, and guess what? We exceeded that. And in fact, most of our utilities now are thinking that we can be the 75 to 80% renewable by the year 2040. We need more technological help, but they think that by then we're gonna achieve that. One of the things that I've been a long supporter, of course, is nuclear, and I know Chris Crane is not able to be here this morning. Illinois, the Midwest, I've got 2 nuclear plants in my district. One is going to be phased out shortly, but the other one has a good number of years likely left, and of course we have no emissions there. And if you look at our economy, pretty good increases in terms of production, real growth, and our emissions over the last number of years have gone down. I was one of the Republicans that opposed us getting out of the Paris Accords when that was announced. I thought they were worthy goals, didn't have a mandate, but they were worthy goals that we should try to subscribe to. And we'll see how this thing emerges over the next couple of years. I know the administration is pulling out, but we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, we have to work together. I think we would all acknowledge that the more that we can do, particularly on renewables, the more that we can do on reducing emissions, the better we are all off. And we need to encourage other countries to follow the same pattern that we have, particularly India as well as China and other places around the world. I'm a member of the Climate Solutions Caucus, the Roosevelt Conservation Caucus. The Roosevelt is more Republican, but the Climate Solution is in fact bipartisan. But we need reality-based goals that create real change, and I look to be a partner in that. And again, I'm a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus as well, a bipartisan group of members. Ted, you're in that as well, I think, right? Group of 50 members. We've done a number of different initiatives. We just introduced an immigration bill this last week, but we were part and parcel of the effort to end the shutdown. We've got good number of good members, and when we are together, we can really look for change. And I think this is one of the things that we'll have on our agenda over the next year. So, with that, the gavel is falling in my health subcommittee, and I'm afraid that I'm going to have to run. But thank you, Bob, for including me, and I'll follow up with Ted later on this afternoon when we have votes as to how things go. So have a good day.
Thanks very much. I will report back to Fred later. Bob, thanks for the nice introduction earlier. It's good to be with everyone. It's good to be in a crowded room in Washington, D.C. this morning talking about climate change. This is probably the second most crowded room in Washington, D.C. this morning. It's really it's quite delightful to be talking about a really important public policy issue that this full room attests to the importance of. That's why I was so excited to be here. I really applaud C2ES for your great work on climate change, the commitment that you've made to bring corporate leadership to the forefront of climate action, and most importantly, just to follow on what Fred said, your deep commitment to bipartisan policy solutions. It's great to be here, if only briefly, with Fred. It is I'm glad that we were able to launch the Climate Solutions Caucus to encourage an expanding dialogue on all of the ways that we can address this. And Fred's a big part of that. Tomorrow is Member Day on the Select Committee to combat the climate crisis, I think that's the name. Members will be offering pieces of legislation, ideas for how to address climate, and the reason the work that you're doing is so important is because many of the proposals that are out there are set out important goals. They encourage studies. They recognize the need for action. But what you're doing, and clearly what you're doing in Getting to Zero, is advocating for more than just a series of proclamations, but actual real action that can do that. Getting to Zero is sweeping in its proposals, provides an important roadmap toward decarbonizing the economy, and I'm glad to be here as you help to launch that. Report after report, study after study show the same thing, that now is the time for urgent action, not more declarations, but real action. Climate change is the greatest challenge that we face. It's the greatest challenge the world has faced, and we can't meet that challenge without a plan that is inclusive, that requires cooperation, and that brings everyone to the table. And I come from Florida. I come from South Florida. Climate change is a reality for us right now. In my home district in South Florida, sea level rise is a driving issue in policy decisions that are made every day at the local government level. The business community recognizes the need to act. On sunny days, there is flooding where the water comes up to your knees. Rising sea levels are lowering bridge heights along the 165 miles of canals in Fort Lauderdale. It makes it difficult for boats to access open water. The rate of sea level rise in Miami outpaces the world increase tenfold. The high water mark has been jumping an inch every year. The highest tides of the year, king tides, flood inland neighborhoods. We did an event in downtown Fort Lauderdale where the whole morning, I think, summarizes the challenges that South Florida faces. We pulled up to park to go into this event on Las Olas Boulevard in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and someone came running over and said, "You can't park in this spot on the street by a meter." I said, "Why?" "Well, because the king tides are going to come and your car will be underwater." He said, "You need to park in the lot." So I pulled into the lot, and he said, no, you have to park in the far end of the lot because the water is going to go until about the midpoint. We then walked into the meeting, and over the course of the half an hour that we were in there, we watched the water on the street along the front door of this business rise to about knee level height. That's what we're dealing with. That's the future for Floridians. At the current rate of sea level rise, almost 300 U.S. cities would lose at least half their homes. 36 U.S. cities would be completely destroyed. That's what we're dealing with right now. The same models estimate that 1 in 8 Florida homes would be underwater. Obviously, it's going to impact the real estate economy. There will be mortgage lenders who are already having a hard time with 30-year mortgages given these challenges. Insurance companies are already having a hard time as well. And without action on climate change, catastrophic losses will occur. That's just fact. And waiting to act is just not an option. Through your Business Environmental Leadership Council, C2ES is an essential voice for the corporate case for climate action. And you've lined up great leaders here today. This has to be a goal. Climate action has to be a goal for corporations and from all parts of the political spectrum, from right to left. We've got to break down the partisan barriers that exist when talking about this issue. I'm thrilled, and I was grateful that Fred spoke up in opposition to the administration's decision to withdraw from Paris. But his was a lone voice, and we need more strong leadership across the political spectrum. Where I come from, the business leaders and the local officials that I described, they're Democrats, they're Republicans. They all understand the threats that we face. They all understand for businesses what it means for the supply chain and what it means for delivery routes and what it means as they plan for their future. And so this framework that you're laying out here today has an ambitious goal of eliminating carbon and zero emissions by 2050. It calls for a long-term framework and the support for research, innovation, deployment of energy efficient technology. By the way, energy efficiency we should be doing right now in the most aggressive ways. Conservation we should be doing right now in the most aggressive ways. It's not controversial on either side. We ought to be doing those, but then we also need to be doing more to address the very real impact that climate change is having, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't negatively impact lower and middle income workers and small businesses. Your plan has a price on carbon pricing. I share that goal. That's why we've introduced the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act to put a price on carbon. I've spoken with business leaders for years now who have shared with me their internal numbers that include a price on carbon. But if there's not an actual price imposed, then those numbers won't lead to any meaningful change. The way we do this, very briefly, we assess the fee at the source of the energy production, and 100% of the revenue is returned to the American people in the form of a monthly check. To reduce our emissions, we've got to have clean, affordable options for energy. That's why the focus on this framework is the perfect companion to carbon pricing. As we start to see the true costs of carbon pollution, cheaper alternatives will lead to carbon-free, prosperous economy. That's why you're here today. We've got to work together, federal officials, state officials, local business community, nonprofits, to confront the challenges. This isn't easy. The challenges are great, but when we talk about our carbon fee bill everywhere in the country and point out it's the only serious nonpartisan effort to address climate change in decades, there is no one who stands up and criticizes it as a partisan effort from either side, because only in Washington, unfortunately, for some, and not for everyone, clearly not for Fred, only here does this continue to be a partisan issue. And your participation today and the involvement of the business community and bringing your voice to this issue with this very ambitious proposal is the best way to break down the political barriers that exist. I know I say that on a day when the partisan tension in this town may be the highest that it's been since I've been here. I acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean that even as those meetings are going on, that the results of this meeting shouldn't lead to greater efforts to bring people together to help address this crisis that affects all of us. That's what we're trying to do. That's what you're trying to do. And I'm really proud to be here and help celebrate this important document, and hope that its launch will lead to greater involvement by many, both here in Washington and around the country. Thanks very much. Good luck today.
Okay, thank you, Congressman, and thanks to Congressman Upton, who had to run off for the markup in his committee, and particularly related to tobacco, and I don't know whether it's vaping or vaping. Vape, thank you. But at any rate, work is going on, as Congressman Deutch just said. So I appreciate them coming. I think that demonstration of the fact that there is bipartisan interest, and particularly bipartisan interest in the responsible voices of business, is a pretty important piece of what we're about.